And we'll get started. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm really excited for this event. We are joined by Dreamers and Doers member Audrina Blackburn and her co-founder Zach Carlin of Summit Chasers. They're going to guide you through creating a clear, actionable strategy for your business. With their combined expertise in high performance strategy and business scaling, they help small business owners, solopreneurs, and teams gain clarity and focus while learning how to allocate resources effectively. You'll walk away with tangible steps to move your business forward with purpose. So Audrina has always been driven by a passion for high performance and precision from her early career as a professional ballroom dancer, where excellence and discipline were non-negotiable, to her role in scaling a performance marketing company from nearly nothing to $75 million. Audrina's career has been defined by a relentless focus on efficiency and on results. Zach Carlin is an expert in scaling businesses and building strategic frameworks that drive growth. With a deep understanding of how to create sustainable, actionable strategies, Zach has guided countless business owners in transforming their operations into organized, scalable systems. Together, Audrina and Zach developed the Summit Strategy Core, which is a framework designed to cut through the noise of goal setting and overwhelming tactics. Their mission is to help business owners create clear, actionable strategies that foster long-term success and sustainable growth. We are so excited to learn from both of you today, Audrina and Zach. Thank you so much for being here. We know how valuable your time is. We know how much it takes to show up and do these kinds of events. So we're just really grateful to you for investing in the Dreamers and Doers community in this way. And with that, I am so excited to hand it over to both of you.
Thank you so much. Zach, do you want to go ahead and share your screen? We have got a presentation for you guys. We're so excited to spend the next 60 minutes with you all. A couple things I want to touch on. Thank you, Nicole, for that amazing introduction. One thing that I really want to specify here is that my zone of genius has always been turning vision into action and really getting into the details and managing people. So today I will tell you, you're primarily going to hear from Zach because this is his zone of genius, is really working with big picture. We're working with the big picture, developing business strategy, and then challenging business owners to really think outside the box. So just want to let you guys know you're going to hear primarily Zach's voice. But before we do that, let's look at what this is not going to be and what this is going to be. So this is not going to be a cookie cutter process, tactic, or template. It is really important that we move away from those things because often that template style strategy that has worked for some does not work for most. So we are really mindful about not giving you that cookie cutter process that everybody has tried to use. This is not going to be a motivational speech. They are so important and so valid for so many reasons. They get us excited, they get us pumped up, they keep our heads in it when things are really tough. But then life can kind of hit us in the face and it'll kind of fade and disappear. So we're not going to be giving a motivational speech today. This is going to be super tactical. Lastly, this is not marketing strategy. I think a lot of times when we hear strategy, we're normally attaching that to marketing. So we want to be really clear that this is looking at your business as a whole and the strategy as a whole rather than just a marketing strategy. Now, let's look at what this is going to be. So this is going to be decision-making principles that are going to allow you to consistently move forward, not second guess yourself, make really clear, concise decisions that are aligned with your strategy moving forward. And the concepts that we're going to go over are really going to act as a guide that you'll be able to make those decisions in line with. They're going to help you look at things from a different perspective, look at yourself from a different perspective, and how you lead from a different perspective. And we're also going to be going through frameworks that will guide you in creating clarity and strategic direction. That this is so important and why I mentioned the cookie cutter thing at the top. That is as unique as you are and your business is. We are not one size fits all, and we absolutely recognize that. So the frameworks that we're going through are going to allow you to shine and show your uniqueness. And lastly, this is going to be a set of tools to really diagnose, identify issues, silent killers, strengths, weaknesses, and possible threats you'll be able to revisit on a consistent basis as we evolve through our businesses. And now that you know what to expect, we're going to take a super quick look at our Summit Success Framework. This is really just a 30,000 foot view. And then we will get into the strategy piece, which is where we're going to spend the rest of the time for today. So Zach, I am going to kick it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you again, Nicole, for that amazing introduction. First of all, saved us some time. And second of all, made us sound awesome. So I really, really appreciate that big time. But like Audrina said, this is just a 30,000 foot view of kind of how we work with our clients and how we work with even just the key players in our own businesses that we own and operate ourselves. And it's kind of this 6 pillar framework. Start with you, unify your team around a collective vision and mission, map your path. Map your path is where we're going to be spending 99% of our time today. That is how you create a clear decision-making process, a clear strategy, and clear strategic objectives on I am here, and this is how I'm going to get here. So creating a map, basically, and how you're going to get from point A to point B and all the different points in between. From there, let's make a clock. So how can I turn this onto a flywheel so that I'm growing consistently? Things are running. Imagine that like a clock. Increasing talent density. How do I improve what I am currently doing? How do I improve the people that are on my team? How do I attract more talented or higher value people to my team and even into my as a customers as well? And then take it back. Take it back is probably the most important because this is where a lot of people don't do. And what we mean by take it back is you got to always take it back to the beginning, which is start with you as your business evolves. Because as your business evolves, your role is going to change, your role is going to evolve. You're going to require different skills, your business is going to look different, and your leadership style is going to change. But like I said, how's that for a 30,000 foot view? I'm out of breath already. We're going to be focusing on this particular piece today, which is map your path. But kind of, I want to give you some examples of some of the businesses, whether they were our clients or some of our own businesses, as we took them through kind of this framework and then some of the results they saw. And this isn't for us to brag, like, look at this amazing results that we got. I actually want to, so you have something to reference as we go through these steps. And you can be like, oh, that's why it matters. Oh, that's how they increased these profits. Oh, that's how they made these decisions. So this is really just so you have a frame of reference so you can apply some of these concepts later on to your business and then kind of see them in action. So one of our businesses that we worked with, this was years ago now, was a home and garden chain out of the South. They increased their profits from 585,000 to 790 in just a little bit over 2 years. They had less micromanagement from the owners. In other words, they were able to step back and actually retire at very shortly after, increased their ability to franchise, which meant big future growth. And they had a clear decision-making framework. So the business owner, so the owners themselves didn't have to be a part of every decision. They had the frameworks so that their GMs and other leaders can make those consistent decisions kind of moving forward. The other company we're going to highlight a little bit today is a real estate brokerage. They went from $108,000 in profit to 198 and a little bit in profit in a little bit over a year. They had more bandwidth for their team to focus on other revenue streams. And in this case, they focused on short-term rentals. So they actually were able to increase their profits by even more, but able to focus on some other revenue streams. And they developed a cadence of diagnosis. Now, diagnosis is a word you're going to hear me say a lot today, but they were able to develop a clear cadence of diagnosis and red flag mechanisms. What I mean by that is if they have kind of like red flag or they have like a red alert mechanisms that they could identify to like, okay, we need to go back and identify why this is happening so we can avoid being avoid being reactive, and we can be more proactive in solving problems, identifying opportunities, and moving forward and grow consistently in our business. The third, but certainly not least, and we picked this one today because it might resonate a little bit more with some of your specific businesses here, just based on what we know from Dreamers and Doers and the types of businesses that kind of evolve in there, is the business concierge service. So it went from 370,000 a year in revenue to 550, and they're actually on pace right now to do 1 million in revenue. The founder is out of the day-to-day operations and they're growing their other businesses. So now they have more opportunities to maybe increase that $1 million mark, or if they're growing other businesses, they're probably investing. So maybe the $1 million won't look like 1 million, but they're able to focus on other things and create future growth. They have clear growth metrics set for consistent decisions and accountability. What we mean by clear growth metrics is they're focusing on the right metrics, not vanity metrics, but the right metrics that are forcing them to focus on the right things, create threshold effects, and consistently know what true growth actually looks like and what that metric is that can measure it. And they go through 4 simple steps. And they look simple when they're written out like this, but when you go through them, they're not quite as simple. We're going to make them as simple as possible for everybody today so that it can be nice and congestible for you today. So 4 simple steps: identify your market environment, survey the landscape, the inside scoop, and then create clear objectives. Now the order of which they're in might change. 1, 2, and 3, that order might change. It depends on your business, where you want to focus the most, where your expertise lies, or just what data is more available to you. However, number 4 stays as number 4. And that's a big mistake a lot of business owners make that we see. They try to create objectives or goals before they do a proper diagnosis. And that 1, 2, and 3 step, that is really what a proper diagnosis should look like. And we're going to take you through some of those concepts and specific tools that you can use to do your diagnosis and identify, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats within your business and kind of push your biases aside. But first, we talked about what strategy isn't a little bit today, is we're not going to be focusing just on marketing strategy. We're not just going to be focusing on operational strategy. We're going to be focusing on your 30,000-foot view of your business. So I really want you to pull yourself out of the day-to-day today as we kind of go through this. But what is strategy? It's an integrated set of choices followed by coherent actions that uniquely positions your business on yourself in its industry and environment to create sustainable advantage and superior value relative to other options. So there's a word in here that I really want you guys to kind of hone in on, and that's other options. We're going to be talking a lot about competitors today and identifying kind of white space in your market. And a lot of times when we say competitors, we're thinking of lookalikes, other businesses and services and products that are very similar to ours. But I want you to kind of pull back from that and look at what are the other options from a customer's point of view when we're looking at some of this stuff. But we're going to come back to that in a minute here. So to start, we're going to go with identify your market environment. Now, this is this might be a little bit of a different concept than some of you maybe are used to when we say like different types of markets and industries and market environments and that kind of stuff. So we're going to look at it from a kind of a different perspective today. We're going to kind of challenge some of your perspectives. So your market environment and defining your market environment, what market environment you're in really dictates what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and actually what defines what a successful strategy should look like. And it actually even defines what successful and effective leadership looks like, right? And a lot of these things are largely determined by your market environments, but I'm gonna give you some really simple examples of what I mean by that. Picture this, all right? You're in Florida, not up here because it's freezing and it would be terrible to have a race car or a sports car up here. But you're somewhere really nice, flat road, windy road. You're in a sports car. It's nice and low to the ground. It sounds amazing. It looks amazing. It hugs the corners. It goes, it picks up like absolute crazy. You'd think like all the strengths of this car is it's fast. It turns really nice. It's comfortable. It's probably not that comfortable, but it looks really cool. It sounds cool. Then you put that same car in the desert, and then all of a sudden its strengths are its weaknesses, and its weaknesses are even more its weaknesses here, right? So it completely mitigates its strengths and weaknesses. Another example would be you put an Olympic swimmer and put them in a strongman competition. Their strengths that were great in swimming are all of a sudden don't matter. They're actually weaknesses now. And the same thing, vice versa. You put the strong man in the pool, he just sinks to the bottom. So all that literal strength means nothing in that specific environment. And that's why it's so important to identify what market environment you're in, because it can dictate what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how you go after opportunities and what kind of that strategic flow should look like to create long-term success for your business. Now, there's 5 main types of market environments. We're only going to go through 4 today. We're going to go through the first 4, so adaptive, visionary, renewal, and classic. We're going to leave shaping out today. That has more to do with like governance change, policy changes, and that type of stuff. So we're going to focus on the top 4. We're going to start with, oh, no, we're not going to start there. Just kidding. Your market environments, they differ along these 3 dimensions. So when we go through these, it's going to be kind of a mixture of these 3 different dimensions. And those 3 are predictability, malleability, and harshness. So predictability, can you forecast the changes? So is there a lot of past data that you can use to identify, okay, this is what's going to happen in the future. So now I can plan really far ahead. Malleability, can you shape the market? So is there lots of room for change? Is there very few policies and regulations that would stop me or stop one single entity business from making big changes in the market? And then harshness is, can you survive it? Can you survive and thrive? So we'll go through some more specific examples, but think like 2008 crash or COVID is another great example of that. So we're going to start with adaptive. Now, adaptive, I got to get Audrina out of my way as much as I like looking at you. There we go. So adaptive. So it's unpredictable and it's really hard to shape. So in other words, it's really hard for one single business and one entity to really change and shape the market. And it's very unpredictable. So think like AI and tech and that type of stuff. And the really simple kind of strategic flow, again, 30,000-foot view, strategic flow that wins is be fast. Those that change the quickest and are able to adapt the quickest, they win. Some characteristics is it's really unpredictable and almost impossible to forecast, which means you have to have really short planning cycles. So if you're in this type of environment, you might only have planning cycles a month or 3 months. It also depends on the size and age of your business, but a lot of them, they're looking 3 months out at the very most. There's ongoing and substantial changes in technologies, customer needs, competitive offerings, or industry structure itself. Advantages are very short-lived. So this is where some people, they live like, okay, I have this service and it is like nothing you've ever seen before. I have this, like AI is like a big thing now. I have this AI bot that does this. It's different than everybody else. But again, this industry changes. This market environment changes really, really quickly. So these advantages that you have, they're very short-lived because somebody's coming up that's quicker than you or has seen an opportunity a little bit sooner than you, and all of a sudden those advantages are gone. The industry maybe is immature, and it's based on changing technologies. History of consistent data is unpredictable and almost non-existent in some cases because maybe it's new or it's ever changing. And typically these industries are very fragmented, and you don't see a lot of commodities, like very like commoditized products, or monopolies really don't exist in this type of market environment. But some examples is fast-moving advancing tech like AI, SaaS, and electric vehicles, always changing trends. So things like social media. Is TikTok going? Is TikTok not going? Are they changing algorithms? Are they not? What is the algorithm? Nobody knows. Or seasonal things. So like think of fashion. So that's why Aritzia is on here. So think like trends change every season and they have to come out and they have to adapt and change really quickly, experiment, find the data, find the trends, and then implement really, really quickly. So think seasonal types of seasonal products, and fashion's a really good example of that. Or just ones with a fast evolving customer base. Their buying habits change really quickly and their attention spans change really quickly and their needs change really quickly. So those are just some really quick examples of an adaptive market environment. Next is visionary. This is what a lot of people think they're in, although they're maybe not most of the time, but visionary. And it's unpredictable. So the market's unpredictable, but it's shapeable. So it's something that there you see a white space or you see underserved customer bases that somebody can come in and they can create a lot of disruption and they can really attack and create a lot of, or sorry, grab a lot of the market share really, really quickly. And the overall arching successful strategy here is just be first. Be the first one there and then hang on. Some characteristics, your industry has uncontested opportunities, like I said, and has opportunities for disruption. There are submarkets with underserved consumers, so they're kind of complacent. They kind of had a monopoly for a long time, or some big businesses had a monopoly for a long time, and then they kind of had this like entropy where they haven't really improved. They don't really care anymore. So there's a big opportunity for underserved consumers. Current companies that are plagued with complacency and inertia, like I said, they have higher market share, which means higher profitability. So in other words, there's not a lot of contested market share in these places and very few regulatory barriers. So you can jump in without having a lot of regulations kind of holding you back. You don't have to jump through as many hoops, in other words. And some really good examples of this, one of my favorite examples of this is PayPal and X. When they first came out, there was very little, even people like thought it wasn't even possible to do online banking or do online payments and beam money from one person to the other just by using their flip phone at the time. So it was really uncontested, very few regulations, although as they progressed and evolved, you see a lot more regulations and a lot more other competition coming in as well. Tesla is a good example of this, but not for the reason of like they didn't invent electric vehicles. It was how they mass produced and went to market with their vehicles. If they produced their vehicles very similar to like a GM or a Ford, their vehicles would be 4 or 5 times more expensive than they were. But they created their innovation and their visionary approach was really focused on how do they produce their vehicles and actually able to keep the costs much cheaper than if they weren't focusing on that aspect of delivering their product to people. Apple, they were the first kind of tech company to combine luxury branding and design. And another example is I have no idea because no one's actually come up with it yet. I'll leave that all up to you to come up with something that we can talk about maybe next time we do this. Third is renewal. So this is where this is an important one, especially you're coming out of COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in a lot of places. Kind of how are these? Are there tariffs? Are there not tariffs? Are there all this kind of stuff? But these are harsh conditions that sometimes are requiring a reset. And the biggest overarching successful strategy is be viable. Survive it. So some characteristics are a deteriorating environment. It could be, again, economy, policy changes, lack of funding, catastrophe, internal shock, and that could even be if you're a business where you rely on really high ticket services or high ticket purchases, and let's say you have 3 or 4 clients that are really paying your bills, and all of a sudden 2 of them leave. that's could be considered a catastrophe or an internal shock, right? And you're going to have to sometimes come back into a more renewal outlook on strategy and just be viable so you can figure out a better strategy moving forward. It's meant to be temporary, short-lived. Too many businesses, especially the medium-sized businesses, they kind of get stuck in the survival mode in this renewal environment. The industry itself shows lower negative growth. Like an example of that is like Kodak. Kodak was like, we're going all in on films, even though these digital things are coming out. So the industry had negative growth at the time. Mismatch between your firm's strategy and its environment itself. So you pick the wrong strategy for the wrong environment, or suffering from external shocks, which an example of that is COVID, 2008 crash, politics, all this kind of stuff. Another example of that is Apple. And I know I talked about Apple already, but think back to when Steve Jobs first came back. They had a really inflated product line. They were hemorrhaging money everywhere. Microsoft was destroying them. Google was destroying them. Steve Jobs came back and he said, we have all these products that are completely wasting money and hemorrhaging money. He cut 90% of their product line. They kind of went into this, again, viable sort of state. Let's just survive for a while. And then let's wait until we see, then what's the next opportunity that's going to help us get out of this? And that opportunity came in the way of the iPod. Talk about the other. I want to stay on that one because it's kind of negative, so I don't want to stay too long on that one. The fourth that we're going to talk about is classical. This is where a lot of businesses, this is like classical environments, kind of where a lot of traditional strategy outlook is based off of. Because again, a lot of businesses in general, they lived in this like very predictable and kind of hard to shape environment for a long time, where they could plan really far ahead, where nothing changed, and when it did, it didn't change really, really quickly. So a lot of earlier strategic outlooks were based on this classical environment, and the main strategy the main outlook on strategy that was successful in the classical environment was just be bigger than everybody else, buy everything. And some characteristics are they have very predictable data with the ability to forecast long term, which means you have longer planning cycles. So instead of like in the adaptive, where it's like 1 to 3 months, sometimes in a classical environment, it could be a year, sometimes 10 years for some examples. It holds a higher percentage of commodities and monopolies. So think of services, even like air travel, real estate, construction, and that type of stuff. It changes, take a lot of time and resources. That's a typo. Changes take a lot of time and they happen incrementally. So again, you don't make big changes really quickly. These changes happen incrementally. Maybe it has to do with like policies that change or big shifts in the market that kind of move like a glacier. They move really, really slow. And there's a long history of data that you can make these predictable bets, long-term bets. And some examples are like GE, General Electric. They're not so successful anymore. However, back in the day, they had planning cycles out 20 years. And if they saw somebody who was about to invent something that could, or come out with some sort of product or service or whatever it is that could possibly be of any harm to them, they would just go buy them. So they really employed the be big strategy. Another good example is Exxon. So like any other bigger oil and gas company, although even that's starting to shift a little bit. Amazon from a 30,000 foot view. Again, today we're backing up. We're looking at things from a 30,000 foot view. Amazon's a really good example of just be big. They're bigger than everybody. Somebody goes and challenges Amazon, they either buy them or they're able to dump a lot of resources in to just completely swallow them. Or any other predictable markets. And we talked about that already. So real estate, construction, shipping, and receiving. Even when something catastrophic happens in the world, the effects on these industries is very predictable. So you can still make adjustments that are needed fairly simply. Oh, I'm out of breath. So what I want y'all to do, even in the chat, is I want you to think as I kind of start to go through this next number 2, survey the landscape, is what market environment, again, 30,000 foot view. What market environment do you think you and your business are operating within right now? I'd love to kind of see. Audrina will be in the chat talking away in there, but I'd love to see what you guys think, what market environment you are currently in. And if you think you're in the right one, if you think the way your business is operating as if you're in the right market environment. But next is survey the landscape. So think of this as like external audit, external SWOT analysis. And as we're going through this, like I said at the beginning, I want you to focus on the customers versus competitors so much. We are going to be focusing on competitors and other options and that type of stuff. But what I really mean here is from now until the end of this section anyways, you're no longer the business owners. You're no longer founders, just temporarily. So don't freak out, just for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. You right now, you are officially your customer. You are your ICP, your ideal customer profile. That is you. Okay. Can everybody do that? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right, so you're your customer. I'm talking to your customers now. All right, and then we're going to identify some key competing factors. We're going to go through kind of what those are and kind of some of the mistakes that I see some founders make when they identify key competing factors. And then we're going to go through a really cool tool. It's actually one of my favorite tools in doing this. Really identifying kind of where you can differentiate and where you can start to attack opportunities. And it's called the competitor canvas. So as we're going through this, you're going to be asking yourself 4 questions. What are the key competing factors? We're going to go through that in a second. What do customers want that the competition isn't delivering? Where are competitors vulnerable? And how can I become indispensable to my audience? Once I have them, once they buy my product, once they get my service, there's no way they could go to anybody else. I'm indispensable to them right now. I solve a problem and I solve it in a way and I solve it quick enough and I solve it at a price point or whatever it is that makes me indispensable to my audience. And again, I'm going to hit on this again from your customer's point of view. Customer's point of view. And particularly, does everybody here kind of understand like the 5 stages of customer awareness? Everybody heard of that before? I can't see everybody. Hide people. A lot of people are aware of this kind of 5 stages of customer awareness. It's a fairly popular kind of way at looking at, okay, where are people at in my funnel and how do I attack them and all that kind of stuff. When I say attack them, how do I make them aware of who I am? So you're not just going to be your customer. You're going to be your customer in kind of that 3 and 4 spot. So they're solution aware. They know there are solutions, but doesn't know maybe about yours as much. Or maybe they're product aware. They know about your solution. They're just not sure if it's the right one. So put yourself as your customer in that kind of 3 or 4 spot here as we're kind of going through this section. Now, what are key competing factors? They are key attributes, features, or criteria that customers use to evaluate and compare businesses within a specific market or industry. So I'll tell you a little, here's an example. So you own a house and your sink starts to leak, right? You have options, okay? Your options could be call a plumber, get them over, or you can go buy the tools, go on YouTube and do it yourself, or you can call a friend and have them come over and do it. And then these criteria, the key competing factors that you use to decide between those 3 options could be, okay, well, if I hire a plumber, it could be really expensive and they might not be able to get here till like tomorrow, but I know that it'll get done right. I know that the quality will be really good. Or I could go buy the tools myself and I could go on YouTube and learn it myself. So then it would be quicker and I have the skills now so I can do it myself later. Although if I screw up, that would be bad. It'll be even more expensive at the beginning. And if I call a friend, they might not even answer. They might not even know what to do. So I'm kind of just flipping a coin at that point. So all those kind of factors that we use to make these decisions between options, those are key competing factors. So it's not just us deciding between which plumber to call or deciding which tools to use or which video on YouTube. It's what are these other options that I have and what are those key competing factors I use to decide between those options. And they represent what customers value most when deciding between competitors or other options and play a crucial role in shaping a business's strategic positioning. They are the primary drivers of differentiation, helping businesses understand how to stand out and where to focus. That's a big word today, is focus their efforts. So we use that once you decide, okay, these are my key competing factors, these are the other options, and then you plant them on what's called the competitor canvas. And it's kind of a guide to understanding your market position, identifying opportunities, and then developing that real differentiation strategy. How do you stand out with your competitors? And it's also a really good tool to get a good idea and get really clear on like messaging and that type of stuff. It's a great tool to go through. It's a great exercise. It's kind of a mix of like 4 or 5 different exercises together. But step 1, define your competitive landscape. So what are the other options? Step 2, identify what those key factors of competition are. You're going to plot the competitors on the canvas. So it's just kind of chart, and I'll show you some examples of that in a second. Analyze the patterns and analyze gaps. Look for opportunities. And then step 5 is you decide what factors can I eliminate or reduce, and what factors can I raise or create. And we'll kind of go through some examples of that right now. So we're going back to that home and garden center. I loved going through this exercise with them. So there are 2 main competitors. They had 2, we kind of bucketed them into 2. Their 2 main competitors were department stores, so like think like Lowe's, Home Depot, and other landscaping businesses. So like the do it for you, the ones that'll come in, tear your yard apart and turn it into a jungle, if that's what you want. And we identified, obviously, if you look at these 2 right here, there's a big gap. There's a big gap in the middle. So they identified that we could come in, a little bit higher priced. We could have very, very knowledgeable, highly trained people here, because if you look here at the bottom here, these are the key competing factors they identified. These are the key competing factors. They're competing on price, knowledge and expertise, convenience, customization, so make it exactly how you want it, and then quality. They identified a big gap here that they could fill, and we'll go through more specifically how they did that a little bit later on. Here's the real estate brokerage company. So they were in a smaller city in central Canada. So they didn't have a lot of competition, but they had a lot of competition in very specific sectors. So by doing this exercise, so you can see here they are here, and they're competing as land developers and then third-party construction businesses. And by doing this here, they could identify really how they could differentiate themselves and maybe a big gap in the market, because a lot of these real estate brokerage companies, land developers, and third-party constructions, they were focusing on smaller land development, smaller houses, a lot of smaller projects. They're like, how could we really differentiate ourselves? And they saw a big opportunity in quality and luxury. So focusing on bigger projects, focusing on really nice, elevating the appeal of the city. And they saw a big opportunity there. This one is the business concierge. They identified a lot of different competitors, but even you could see, if you see here, there were some big opportunities as far as price. So when it's up on price, it means that it's like cheaper. It means that it's not cheaper, but it's better, more fairly priced. If it's down at the bottom, it means it's really expensive. But they saw a lot of opportunities, because those that were really cheap on price, they weren't really good on quality or consultative approaches or sometimes convenience or customizable. So they thought, okay, how can we come in at a better price point, but still offer some of these things that a lot of those other agencies and all those other options are not offering? So because they did this, they knew where to focus their differentiation resources, where to improve, where to not improve, and where to pull back. What are they willing to give up? I hope that made sense. So what I want you to do in the chat as we kind of go through this is I want you to, what do you think in your industry, and again, you're your customer in this case, what are those key competing factors that you as your customer are using to decide between you and other options? And again, this is from their perspective. I know that you're probably like, this other option is stupid. Your customer doesn't know any better. Your customer is not you. They don't know the industry like you do. They don't know the ins and outs of whatever you do like you do. But what are those other options that they're choosing between from their perspective? And then what are those key competing factors that they're using to determine, am I going to go with option one or am I going with option two? Am I going to hire the plumber? Am I going to go buy a wrench and hope that I don't flood my house? What are those key competing factors? Next, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're crushing it. I'm going to slow down for a second. I'm going to run out of air. All right.
Don't
Next,
slow down, Zach. Keep it pushing.
we got the ins. I'm going to tell so many stories. She drives her nuts when I start
No.
telling stories. So the inside scoop. So think of like an internal audit. This is now where you're back as the founder. You're back now. You're back where you want to be. This is where you got to be really honest. This is where you got to put your biases aside. There's one bias in particular, especially if you provide a service, and even if you provide a product, but definitely if you provide a service where you have this expertise bias, where you look internally and every problem or every opportunity could be grasped or every problem could be solved by your area of expertise. But that's generally not the case. And again, like Audrina said at the beginning, this isn't marketing strategy. A lot of marketers will think all their problems can be solved by like, let's get better at marketing, just adjust the marketing tactics, just adjust the marketing strategy. You get somebody who's really focused on operations, like we can just make it more streamlined, more SOPs, all this kind of stuff. This is where you got to put those biases aside, look at it from different angles, and use a tool like we're going to go through the gain the operating analysis and be really, really honest and be open to other ideas and open to other maybe lacking areas of your business. So we're going to define what's called your economic driver. We're going to go through what that is in a second. Identify operating performance. And we're going to do that by going through a tool. That's, again, one of my other favorite tools. That's why I'm talking about it, called the gain to operating analysis. So first, what is an economic driver? It's a key factor or variable or metric that has a significant impact on a company's performance, customer client lifecycle, overall growth, and definitely profitability. It influences directly the economic value of a business and is central to strategic planning and decision making. Now, the importance of identifying this, again, this is like, think like a North Star metric. It's kind of like if you're watching, if you're into sports or anything like that, and you're watching a hockey game or a football game or whatever you're watching, the economic driver generally during the game is what's the score? Who's winning? Who's winning? Right? And if you are a team that just focuses on that, who's winning this game, are you focusing on the big picture, which is where you at in the standings in the season? Are you going to make the playoffs? How many points does your team have? How good is your team doing long term? Are you set up to perform well for the next 3 or 4 years, or are you just set up to perform this year? So it really, this economic driver metric helps you look at your business as a whole and allows you to zoom in on the right things. And it's really important in strategic planning, resource allocation, managing risk, performance measurement. That's an obvious one. Focus, which again, we're going to say a lot, helps you focus on the right things. And probably most importantly, or up there anyways, it creates what's called a threshold effect. The threshold effect is the right amount of force focused on the right place to create the right amount of change or impact. A lot of times we look at everything all at once, and then we put a little bit of effort, a little bit of resources, a little bit of bandwidth and time into all these places. And because we're spread so thin, we actually don't make any impact. What having a clear economic driver does is it focuses your resources and your focus and your bandwidth, your people, everything else you can think of into the right place. That creates that threshold effect, which means there's enough force, there's enough effort put in the right place to make the biggest impact on your business and on your life, probably in a lot of ways. Now, some of you probably, as we went through that, as I explained what that was, you probably had some ideas of what your economic driver could be, what it currently is, and what is that metric that you care about the most, that every day you check. We all have that one. Don't lie. We all have that one metric or one or two metrics where like every day we're like, how are we doing? Okay, where are we at? How many new followers do I have? Whatever that is. And if you have that, I want you to go through these 3 questions. And the answers to these questions will determine if that economic driver is truly the right economic driver for you. So does the increase truly indicate success in your business? That's a simple one. So basically we're asking, is this a vanity metric? One that a lot of businesses look at that absolutely drives me nuts, and it's probably the most problematic metric to look at, is just gross profits. Looking at gross profits. That's probably the most reckless one you can look at. If you're somebody who hasn't really hit profitability yet or is making a ton of money every month, that's just not your focus right now. It could be activities that you're doing and the outcome of those activities. So, okay, I'm posting 20 times a week and I'm getting 30 followers. Cool. If I'm focusing just on followers, is that actually indicating that my business is growing, or is just my followers growing? So again, we go back to, is it a vanity metric? What is your economic driver currently pushing your focus towards? So when that metric goes up or down, what do you immediately, where do you go to next? Where does your focus go? So that metric goes down, where do you go? Where's it pushing your focus? Does it take into account your gain to operating in different sectors of your business? Now that's what we're going to do next, is your gain to operating analysis. And that is a tool used to identify your business's current performance by analyzing the relationship between operating sectors. It could be products, investments, costs, and even locations, different service offerings. You can even use it with different customer profiles. You can use it with different, if you're in marketing, it's an obvious one. You can use it between different like social media platforms and compare those. And then you can really see, okay, I'm investing a lot of time here, although I'm not getting any, it's actually, I'm losing a lot by focusing on this. And then the rest of my products or sectors are actually subsidizing this one thing. If I got rid of this, it'd actually be more profitable. The purpose of this is to pinpoint where the most significant gains and losses are coming from, identifies entropy or lack of focus and poor management in your business, understand which operating costs are driving or hindering profitability. And again, like I said, this can work with many aspects of your business. We're going to give you, again, we're going to run through examples today of those 2 or 3 businesses that we talked about earlier and what that looked like for them. But you can use this with any aspect of your business. Absolutely any aspect. One that I like is, okay, we have somebody who does 200 outreaches a day. That's a lot. Well, their business does 200 outreaches a day, and that yields how many new, let's say, people that subscribe to your newsletter. So we reach out to 200 people a day. We get 10 people that subscribes to our newsletter. Out of those 10 people that subscribe to our newsletter, what does that do? So I do 200 reach outs, and I only get 10 subscribers. So I have 10 prescribers per 200 reach outs. It could be something as simple as that right now, depending on where you are in your business. Now, the process of going through a gain operating analysis, step 1 is list all your revenue streams, or again, it doesn't have to be just revenue. It could be activities to outcome, and you see their associated gains or losses. List them out from most profitable to least. Okay, what is yielding the best outcome to what is yielding the least outcomes? Step 3, what does the chart tell you? Does it create a hump chart, ledge chart, or a ramp chart? And we're going to kind of go through all 3 of those. But a hump chart is basically where the most profitable things are like, oh my God, it looks so good. And then you get to the least profitable things and like, oh, I'm actually losing money on those things. So it looks like a hump. Or a ledge chart where the things that are most profitable, I'm shooting to the sky, and then the rest I just aren't doing anything. Or where everybody wants to be, which is a ramp chart, where it's just like you go straight up. That's where you want to be, is on that ramp chart. And then you analyze the correlation between your gains, losses, and these different segments of your business or different activities. This is the home and garden center. This is their after chart. This is their after gain operating analysis. They had 4 locations at the time that we did this gain operating analysis with them. So their first location was crushing it. This was their like home location. They lived in upstairs, I think, at the time of that location. It was doing 486,000 in revenue. Location 2, it bumped their total revenue up to 650. So this one was only doing about $200,000 in revenue, which is great, but not quite 486. The next was doing a little under 100,000 in revenue. The last was doing about $50,000 in revenue. So it brought their total revenue to 790. It was closer to 785. But you don't just add them all together, right? This is your total business's revenue, total business positive outcome from comparing these different sectors of your business, or again, different activities. And this is one that actually was somebody who went through our strategy challenge, our 1-week strategy challenge. And she had a feeling that this was happening. She actually segmented she compared different customer profiles to each other. So she kind of put them out to like these 2 different relationship types. So they had like long-term relationship and then very transactional. And she created, like, this is a ledge chart where her relationship, this customer segment, was very profitable, very, very profitable for her. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm doing all this for no reason. Right. So on the numbers, it's like, well, she's still making some money, but what are the opportunities that she's missing by focusing on things that aren't actually gaining anything? How much bandwidth is she losing? How much time is she losing? Or she could be focusing on getting more of these clients. Right. And again, she had a feeling that this was happening, but when she did the chart, she was like, oh no, I need to make a change. And then she did. So I want you to think of right now, before we jump into this next part, which is creating those clear objectives. Now that we've done a diagnosis, we saw what some opportunities, what are some threats, what are some places maybe I'm falling behind, or places that I need to focus that I weren't focusing on. What would what would be your economic driver? What do you think that economic driver would be for you that would allow you to focus on the right things, that would really measure true success in your business? What do you think that is for you right now? Is it the exact thing that you were measuring before, or maybe do you have a different outlook on what that could be right now? I'd also like to hear kind of what sector of your business you would want to do a gain operating analysis on, to really see like, okay, I'm putting all this effort and resources into these areas. Am I really getting back what I should be getting back? Am I really kind of making progress in places I think I'm making progress? So I'd love to hear that from you. But the next step, and again, this is the step that a lot of people just skip to. They don't do the diagnosis. They don't do a proper diagnosis. They don't spend the time on doing step 1, 2, and 3 to allow them to make the right decisions, not using these decision-making principles to create clear objectives and clear ways forward. So we're going to define what's called a key mission objective, and break that down into what we call key strategic objective. So a key mission objective, it's an overarching objective that focuses resources, personnel, decision-making on a goal. For the most part, unless you're a bigger company, like when I say bigger, I mean like 10, $50 million company, you really should only have one. You should really only have one key mission objective at a time, right? And it allows you to focus and create leverage and position of strength or competitive advantage that's in line with your overall mission and vision of your business. So we go back to when we were talking about some of those market environments. The length of time that you would set a key mission objective out would be dependent really on what your market environment is. So if you're in a more adaptive market environment, things are moving really quickly, things are changing all the time, and you have to make quick changes. You have to adjust really, really quickly. You have to run experiments, and then you have to get the data back, and then you have to make changes really quickly. You might only have like a month or 3 months that you set this key mission objective where you really start to reevaluate things. If you're in a more classic environment, it might be a year. It could be 6 months, right? So the time of which really dictates the environment that you're in and the type of business, really kind of where your business is as far as like maturity goes. And then from there, you break out into key strategic objectives, which is they're the top 2 to 3. Again, you don't want to do too much more than that, or any more than that. That will help you gain advantage and leverage to achieve your key mission objective and overall success of your business. So a lot of people here, you might be aware of kind of what the difference between lead and lag measures. Lag measures is something that already happened. When you measure it, you can't really change it. Lead measures are something that indicate the success of the leg measures, right? So they're more like activities. Your KSO would be kind of those lead measures to your key mission objective. If we focus on this, if we achieve these things, we're much more likely to achieve the key mission objective, right? And they kind of allow you to set smaller short-term goals that are much more tangible and much more like you're able to focus on them a bit more, because sometimes you're at the bottom of a mountain, you look at the top of the mountain, which is how you the top of the mountain dictates or it indicates the success you want in your business, and you're looking up this mountain, you're like, oh my god, how am I going to get there? These key strategic objectives and key mission objectives are kind of those base camps. They're kind of that one foot in front of the other and how I'm going to achieve that over time. I'm very visual, and this is kind of a visualization of the key mission objectives and key strategic objectives I liked. So again, we talked about map your path. This is literally a map. So you're here. I don't know if you can see my marker. I might be doing that for no reason. You're here, and your vision, the top of the mountain, is here. The X's indicate your key mission objectives. They're these objectives that create foundation. They create advantage. They create leverage for you to continue moving forward to your vision. Think of them. I don't know if anybody here is rock climbers. I'm not. I'm terrified of heights. But think of like your key mission objectives, these X points on the map here. If you're climbing a mountain, you're rock climbing, those are those anchor points that you drive into the wall, right? So if you fall back to that next point. You fall back to that point, right? So they're that foundational point that doesn't allow you to completely collapse. Audrina's telling me to hurry up. Got time? Okay, perfect. And the key strategic objectives are your hands finding is just those next placements in front of each other, right? And then the distance between each X is usually measured by your economic driver. So whatever that profit per whatever is, you're here. This is where I need to get to create that advantage so that I can move on to the next. I can create that foundational advantage so I can move on to my next objective. And again, it makes them much more, I'm not gonna say easy, but simpler to vision and simpler to plan for. And I like this kind of breakout of a key strategic objective. So you have your key strategic objectives and you have the actions, activities that go along with your key strategic objective. So what are those activities that will, I need my team to focus on, or I need me to focus on, that will allow me to achieve these key strategic objectives? And then what are the KPIs that tell me or indicate to me that these actions and activities are the right actions and activities to achieve my key strategic objective? So I'm going to skip that part. We're going to go right into an example. So we're going to start with the home and garden chain. So we're going to go through this really quickly so you can see kind of how we went through these steps with these businesses to get the results that we did. So when we first started with this business, and again, they were out of, I think they're out of Alabama or Kansas or something. They're in the South. And their initial economic driver was just the yearly net profit. And the yearly net profit was $585K. And a little bit of background, their year prior was just over 500K. And they just opened another store. So that economic driver was telling them, put their focus to, okay, we open more stores, more net profit. That's the equation. So we put it through these three questions. Does their increase truly indicate success in your business? Yeah, but only for short term. And then just from that one point of view, which is that net profit. Again, overall, the business's net profit, not each individual store. What is your economic driver currently pushing your focus towards? Again, they just opened a new location. So like new location equals more profit. Does it take into account your gain to operating in different sectors of your business? No, it didn't compare individual store. It didn't compare products. It didn't compare any of those types of things. And their initial market environment was adaptive because they kept opening new stores in different areas with different products and different people. So they had to be really quick. They had to adapt really quickly because these stores in these certain areas, they had different customer profiles. They had people that cared about different things. So they're constantly having to adapt, constantly having to change things. And this is their initial gain operating analysis. They had 6 locations. Number 4 is the one they had opened about a year and a half prior. So you see their first location, again, absolutely crushing it. Second location, basically the first 2 locations were subsidizing the rest of their company. Location 3 was doing okay, right? But still greatly underperforming compared to these 2. And then boom, they got to that location 4 again, which was their newer location. So they kind of took their focus away from it because they're like, it's new, it'll get there sort of thing. But then these other locations, they were really far away. They were in really inconsistent areas, inconsistent products, and they really sucked their profits. Really, they operated at quite big losses. So technically you look at this and be like, oh, if you just closed 3 stores, you'd be more profitable. That wasn't their MO, but they had no idea that this was really the case. Again, they had a feeling, but then when we really broke it down, they're like, oh no. So we updated an updated economic driver for them was they focus on profit per store with a guiding principle that individual stores need to keep their total profit percentage above 10% of total profits. That was their red flag mechanism. Okay, so it's under 10%. We either do a turnaround or maybe this isn't just the right location for us. And they started operating in a new market environment, which was renewal. They had to come back, be viable, find out what's working, and then take advantage of opportunities once they presented themselves. So does this economic driver, does it increase, truly indicate success in your business? Yeah. And now each store is now bonused on individual success. Is their economic driver currently pushing their focus towards? What is it pushing their focus towards? Improving the performance and quality of each location and then systemizing for consistency. Does it take into account their gain of operating? Yeah, it created a ramp chart versus OM chart. And it was much easier to zoom in on specific location gain of operating metrics. We also, when we went through the competitor canvas with them, again, we went through this already, we saw a big gap here, saw a big gap. So they could really differentiate themselves by almost having experts, taking like a more of a coaching consultative approach for a lot of these do-it-yourself gardeners. Again, it was older people that cared about their gardens, people that wanted to like do it as a hobby. So they took a more consultative approach and really differentiated themselves. And we already saw their hump chart. This is what it looked like 2 years later. They got location 4, got its act together, and these locations are no longer having to subsidize this 4th location. And then their goal was their KMO was really to economize. So pull back, find out what's working, identify the store with the highest growth potential, and then identify its processes and products and what worked, and then replicate it. KSO2 was cut the lowest 2 potential stores and made the remaining profitable within 12 months. And it was that newest store that they made profitable within that 12 months. I think it took about 16 months. KSO3 was to document the processes to leverage a shift to a franchise model in the future, which was more of a classical environment. So they wanted to go from renewal and then shift into classical, predictable. They could manage really long, or sorry, they would plan really far ahead and they could replicate it. It was consistent. Business concierge, their initial, I'll go through this one quickly. Their economic driver was just yearly revenue and just more clients, get more clients. Their gain of operating analysis showed a loss in revenue with the smaller client packages because they wanted to help everybody. So even if the client wasn't the right fit for them, we're like, we'll just make it work and we'll do way more work than what you're paying us for. So they operated a huge loss when it came to those smaller client packages. And their initial environment was classic. They're operating as if they were in a classic environment. They're operating with a top-down leadership, was highly reliant on the founder itself, and they took a really long time to make any adjustments. And again, we looked at this. This was their competitor canvas. Without them, they saw opportunities where things were really expensive if they wanted to get results, and it was really expensive if they wanted a more consultative approach. So they found a way to be able to offer those things at a very fair price. Their new economic driver was profit in the first month of a new client. So in other words, how efficient is their onboarding process? Are they bringing somebody on and it's just all hell breaks loose and everybody has to jump in, nobody knows their role, there's no process, and all of a sudden they're operating at a huge loss in month 1, and then the client sometimes leaves because it's a crazy experience, and now they're operating at a loss most of the time. So their focus, their economic driver was what can we get our profit? How efficient can we make that first month of onboarding and new clients? And I allow them to focus on a lot of the right things. They also created a new cost structure with restructured packages to not oversell to the smaller clients. And they shifted to a more adaptive market environment. So they had a more bottom-up leadership style. They made quick and small experiments, which allowed them to make quick adjustments. Their KMO was to reach 40% profitability in the first month of the onboarding process per client. And their KSO was to create a consistent, streamlined onboarding process, hire an account director to oversee operations and client fulfillment, and clearly define roles for the team with set expectations and proper training. So everybody knew what they were supposed to do, when they were supposed to do it, and nobody was stepping all over each other. It was to really streamline that initial onboarding process, which again allowed them to focus on the right things and created long-term success for their business. I need to breathe for a minute here. We try to get, again, we condensed like a week-long course in here. But if you take away anything, I know we threw a lot at you, it's the importance of having a proper diagnosis that allows you to make the right decision and utilizing clear and consistent decision-making principles to make those strategic decisions. Again, a strategy is just a diagnosis followed by coherent actions and objectives. But that diagnosis is the most important part, and that's where a lot of businesses miss. And a lot of times having these tools and having like a really simple framework so you can create your own structure makes the biggest difference. But anyways, I just want to say thank you for letting me run out of oxygen in front of everybody. I hope you got something out of it. I'm going to kick it over to Audrina before she yells at me.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you guys so much for spending your time with us. Go ahead, go to the next slide, Zach.
Sorry.
So if an hour wasn't enough for you, and I know that we threw so much at you guys, but we action pack our workshops, our strategy challenge, because this is the information and the tools that you guys are going to be able to utilize to set yourself up on that path to making those really clear decisions and having your strategy in line with your vision and mission. So if that wasn't enough time and you want to spend more time with us, really zooming in on your business strategy, we have a 5-day strategy core challenge. It's the perfect opportunity to do that. Our next challenge dates are coming up end of February and end of March, as you can see. A couple things I want to touch on, and I'll wrap this up super quick because I'm sure you guys have got places you have to be. We keep these cohorts really small, so there's just 10 spots in each. You work really close with other business owners, as well as Zach and either Chantal, who's a fellow Dreamer member who's on our team, or Paco. And because you guys are working so closely with each other, we really want to make sure that it's the right fit for you and where you're at in your business. So if you guys are interested at all in joining the upcoming challenges, we'd love to just chat with you guys for 15 to 20 minutes. We're super intentional when it comes to building out these cohorts so that everyone involved just gets the most out of it. And then for those of you that stuck it out, we are offering you guys a 20% off discount code. It's typically $1,000. That 20% will take it down to 800. And usually for Dreamers, we keep it at 15%, but because you spent time with us, we're going to bump that up. And then lastly, I know that we covered, again, so much today. We've actually put together a workbook that has each of these exercises that we went through today in it. So you're not having to remember everything that we talked about and everything that we threw at you. You'll get that PDF in your inbox from Nicole, and you guys can revisit it and start putting these things into action and really start redefining and resetting the focus within your business. But thank you guys so much. If anyone has any questions for us, me and Zach will be hanging out. We've got, I think, the next 15 minutes available. And I just dropped the scheduling link in the chat as well if anybody wants to see if the challenge might be the right fit for you. Thank you, guys.
Yay, thank you so much, Audrina and Zach. This was so wonderful and so action-packed. I will keep the Zoom open for a couple minutes for anybody who has any questions so that we can do a little bit of Q&A. But just wanted to say thank you to you both, and thank you to everybody for joining us. This was so wonderful. And as you said, we will be sharing those resources post-event, so you'll all be getting those in your inbox as well. Thank you both so much for your wisdom and your expertise and your time and your energy.
Thank you
Absolutely.
all.
Thank you.
We excited to be able to be here and do this. Like, I absolutely rave about Dreamers all the time. So Zach is like, he feels like he's like a sub member because he gets to hear about it all the time. So just thank you guys for giving us the time.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. And if we do have questions, folks, feel free to unmute or write into the chat, but we'll hang for a minute or two and just see if anybody has any questions that they want answered before we break for the day.
Well, and Katerina, if you're still around, I know I saw your question about the chart and how does that work? And yes, super fast and trying to get through the information. But Zach, our question in chat was why the locations that are higher on the chart weren't the ones doing well. And I mentioned that like once the stores hit the peak, those remaining stores are essentially losing the company money overall because the rev starts dropping off per store. I'm not sure, Zach, if you can add any detail to that to try to make that concept a little bit clearer for the home and garden.
Yeah, so you think of if they were higher on the chart, that it wasn't necessarily that wasn't their revenue. So if it went from like 500,000 to 700,000, that store in this case, that store, their profit wasn't 700,000. It was the difference between the two. It was 200,000. So there, you think of the company as from a whole, right? So the company from a whole, with those two locations, the company as a whole profit was 700,000, right? So they put on the chart from the most profitable, which was 500,000 in this case, and then the next profitable is 200,000. So that brought their profits up to 700. And then the next profitable was 50,000. It brought their profits up to 750. And then from there, they started to the rest of the stores actually started losing money. So then their overall profits actually went down. So that's why it kind of looked like that. I could see why that would be confusing. Those charts are a little bit different like that. Usually it's like this one's here and then this one's down here and then it would look like that. But you're thinking like from the business as a whole. So their entire profit, the entire outcome in profits from their different stores because again, all their stores are collective of the one business. What's their profits as a whole, if that makes sense.
I think I'll add one other piece to that that might help, at least it helps my brain. So if we looked at that chart, they started at their profit being 450. When they got to that top store, it was up to 750, like Zach said, but where they ended because of the other remaining stores was actually at 585. So if they didn't have those other 3 locations, they would have actually been sitting at 750. But because they did, they were only sitting at 585. I hope that that kind of clears it up a little bit.
Yeah, so their first location, their revenue, the revenue from the first location brought them to 450. So the revenue of the first location was 450. And the second location, combining those two, brought their company's total revenue to 660. So really that location 2 was, what is that? I'm bad at math. $210,000 in revenue. Location 3 brought them from 660 to 740. So what is that? $80,000 in revenue for that location 3. So that's their total overarching company's revenue. Then from there, these started operating at a loss. So this one was a $30,000 loss. Location 4 was at a $30,000 loss. And then this one was at like a $55,000 loss. And I don't know how to do math, but yeah, that's kind of how it goes. And again, you can do this with anything. You can do it. I've used it before with businesses when if they're or business owners like solopreneurs, if they're focusing on, like, I'm putting all my effort into all these different social media platforms, and they even use like hours per booked call. So I spend 2 hours on Instagram, 2 hours on TikTok, 2 hours on LinkedIn, and I do reach outs, I post, I comment on people's posts. And then if I spend all this time and effort, what's the outcome I'm getting? So how many calls am I booking? So they noticed that I think it was TikTok, they would spend 2 hours on it, but then they would book like one meeting, or they'd book very few meetings. So it actually showed more of like that ledge chart where they would put a lot of effort into this one place, but it wasn't really getting them anywhere at all. So they knew that like I either needed to improve how I was showing up on TikTok, or I needed to cut it out and focus on the other things and add an extra hour to each of those things that are being more viable for the outcome that I'm looking for. That makes sense.
Oh, it looks like that helped. Thank you, Katerina.
Absolutely.
Yay. Any other questions before we hop? Wonderful. Thank you both so much. You're amazing and awesome.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you. This was wonderful. Thank you for sticking around a little bit extra.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
We'll see you. Okay,
All
bye.
All right.
right, see you.
Bye, guys.